really owns the gold? Is it the governments, or is it the central banks, or property of the people? And that's what's happening in Italy and how they are actually defining gold ownership. There is a huge debate that is raging right now, and I think that it is a critically important debate, which is why we're going to talk about it today. And that's what's happening in Italy and how they are actually defining gold ownership. Because we think that the government is supposed to work for us, the people, right? And therefore, if a country owns gold, well, then don't the people own gold? I don't know. Let's just dive into this and see what happens. Because as you can see, basically Italy accumulated most of its gold after World War II, and that's pretty much where they've sat up until this day. But gold becomes a cornerstone of national financial security. In '99, Italy integrated into the Eurozone. And so interestingly enough, when you become a member in the Eurozone, their gold reserves are formally integrated into the Euro system framework. Wait a minute. So the gold reserves are now part of the Eurozone framework, and the Bank of Italy, well, they retain their management authority, but those reserves are considered part of the collective Eurozone system. So what happened in 2011? Do you remember the Eurozone debt crisis, the sovereign debt crisis? And there was all this public debate that emerged about whether Italy's gold could be used to backstop that national debt. So this is not the first time the question of ownership has come up, but the ECB at that time stressed that reserves are under central bank control, not government disposal. Okay. 2019, there were a lot of political proposals, and Italian lawmakers proposed declaring gold reserves as property of the people, which is probably what most people think anyway. Okay, well, that's our goal, but the ECB again warns against politicizing reserves, emphasizing central bank independence. Wait a minute. Who owns the gold? Well, we're talking about it again. And Brothers of Italy Party asserts that foreign entities should have no rights over Italy's gold. So those proposals are resurfacing again to classify reserves as belonging to the Italian people. But who really owns it? Even if it's reclassified, because again, the ECB reiterates that under EU law, the Bank of Italy alone manages the reserve. Now we're coming up into 2026, and there are new tax measures that are on the table on private gold holdings. And they're trying to get that gold that's out in the system right now that they have no visibility over, no control over. They're trying to get the public, like they've done for quite some time in India, to deposit to let the government know where the gold is. And they're introducing a preferential tax scheme of 12.5% for citizens to revalue that undocumented investment gold. But this is gold that they might have had from inheritance or wherever else. There's estimated 5,000 tons of privately held gold targeted, rising potential billions in revenue. This is as important for the US and China and everywhere else in the world as it is in Italy. Because in times of fiscal stress or political upheaval, Italy's gold reserves, they keep becoming a focal point of debate. But really, let's take a look at that, because that ownership question highlights the tension between national sovereignty. How about individual sovereignty and the European monetary rules, which are created by central bankers that are not elected, and they don't really represent the public? They represent, and their job is to support private banks. Let's take a look at what's happening, because we can see the level of the gold reserves that exploded in Italy after World War II and during the Bretton Woods era, when the US was the world reserve currency and tasked with maintaining the dollar's value against gold at 35 to 1 ounce of gold. Now, you need to understand that Italy has the third largest gold hoard of any country, or even accumulation countries. And so they're looking to get that back, as much gold as they can that is now privately held, into the system. Once they know where all that gold is, it kind of could be a setup for a gold confiscation too. I don't know. There are people that are living on opium. that believe that gold confiscation could never ever happen again. But that's because they're living on an opium, frankly, is not a very good plan. So are they going to entice all of that gold into the system because they want to uncover it? Just like the tokenization, the banks need more collateral so that they can grow more debt and leverage, and they're trying to entice it back into the system through tokenization. Well, I can tell you, if there's ever a choice, I'm never going to choose to tokenize my gold. That's the beauty of it. It is private, and it cannot be inflated away by governments and central banks, which is exactly what they want us to do. They need to be able to create that inflation. So the big question, and I want you to be asking yourself this, who really owns the gold? And doesn't it make sense for you to become your own central banker so that you have control and have a foundation in sound money that cannot be inflated away? Do you see this debate and this question? Because honestly, it's something that rages over and over again, but it's also something that once it's defined in one place, it can be defined that way. That way, every place. The European Central Bank has warned Italy against declaring its central bank gold reserves as well as property of the people. But if it is indeed property of the people, even the government would not have the right to confiscate it and do a gold revaluation. This is something that lies in our future. But if you're prepared today, you're in a better position, because the ECB stresses that such a move would undermine central bank independence, because maybe they're the real owners of that gold. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and if you don't hold it, you don't own it, and that is about to be proven. They risk politicizing reserves that are meant to safeguard financial stability. All right, what do those words actually mean? Politicizing reserves. Wait a minute, who paid for that gold? Pretty sure it was the taxpayer that paid for that gold, don't you think? So if the taxpayer paid for that gold, wouldn't it be the public's gold? And actually what gold does is it forces fiscal responsibility because there's a finite amount of. But what do you mean that it's meant to safeguard financial stability? What they mean is that if the central bank owns the gold, and we've watched global central bankers accumulating the most gold that they ever have in history over the last 4 or 5 years, if the central bank actually holds the gold, then at any time they can back the currency with that gold. And that's what gives the markets confidence, because sound money is actually there. But the central banks, and I know in this country it's called the Federal Reserve, but they're neither federal nor do they hold reserves. They are a private bank, so taxpayers paid for the gold, but central banks are holding it. And I mean, you've got to ask yourself, whose gold is that? It's just your perception that it's yours, and they're proving it. Because Italy reassures the ECB that they are not going to change the ownership of central bank gold. It's not central bank's gold, it's taxpayer gold. But can you see how this is being positioned? Can you see that they're actually talking the truth? It's not the government that owns the gold, it's not the people that own the gold. The people paid for the gold through their sweat and their taxpayer dollars. But it's the central banks that were given this gold. And are they really the ones that are owning this? And can you see that this is a conversation that's happening right now? Not 100 years ago, though, it should have happened then. Not 50 years ago. Today, Rome, December 9th, Italy will tell European Central Bank Christine Lagarde on Tuesday that Rome has no plans to undermine the independence of the country's central bank by stating that its gold reserves belong to the Italian people. I want you to think about this, and if you have to watch this video again, you've got the links to all of these articles and more below. Click on those links. This is such an incredibly important decision. You need to really understand this, because foreign entities should have no rights on Italy's gold reserves. Well, that's what their government is saying. But aren't they talking out of both sides of their mouth? Because on one hand, they're saying that foreign entities should have no rights on Italy's gold reserves. On the other hand, they're telling the ECB, the European Central Bank, that they're not going to make sure that it's defined as the people owns the gold. This is critical. I'm so glad that somebody brought this up and made me look at this much deeper, because that's how important this is. Italy's large public debt and fiscal challenges have made its gold reserves a sensitive issue, with some lawmakers suggesting they could be leveraged to support state finance. And ultimately, they will be leveraged to repay all of that debt, with euros in that country that have zero value. because even though most other countries do not publish the purchasing power of their currency, they're all judged against dollars. So you'll see when you go into I happen to use ECOM, but you can use any currency converter. Pick any currency you want, your choice. It doesn't matter. Do it against the dollar. And you're going to find that typically, not in 100% of the cases, but in most cases, the dollar outperforms that other currency. So it's one against the other. And so that's why you might hear this currency is stronger. This currency is weaker, but it's just on a relative basis. The thing that really matters for people is how much you can buy with it. It's that purchasing power. And what are we finding? A purchasing power everywhere in the world is declining as witnessed by inflation. So what they're talking about here is the revaluation of gold to repay that debt with euros that have zero value. This is something that happens 100% of the time to attempt to regain public confidence. It doesn't really work because they don't really make changes right away. But the reality is it happens every single time. So let's look at this because that's the big question here. Who actually owns the gold? Legal ownership. The gold is held by the Bank of Italy. That is a central bank. It is not a government agency. It is a private bank, and they manage it as part of the euro system. That, my friends, I hate to tell you, is who legally owns the gold. So the gold legally belongs to the Bank of Italy, managed within the euro system, but politically it's being portrayed as the property of the people. Well, of course it is. It's called perception management. If they can manage how you perceive things, then they can nudge you in the direction that they want you to go. But here it is right out in the open. The gold is legally belongs to a private bank, even though it was tax dollars that paid for the gold. It was yours and my tax dollar. Well, we're not in Italy, but this is true all over the world. It's not the government that owns the gold legally, just like it's DTC that owns all of the bonds legally, all of the stocks legally. In a court of law, your perception doesn't mean anything. Nothing. It is the legal rights that are addressed. This is why I tell you all the time how important it is for you to become your own central banker. And Zang Enterprises has that layered strategy. So we approach it on a shorter term basis, an intermediate term basis, and a longer term basis. There's lots that going on, but the reality is if you don't hold it, you don't own it. This tension reflects a broader struggle between national sovereignty claims and European monetary rules. Do you see what I'm saying here? Who's really driving this bus? Who really has all the power? Is it the governments that take on more and more and more and more debt? Or is it the central banks that actually own everything? And these are private corporations. The US Constitution isn't recently destroyed. It was destroyed when they legalized the Federal Reserve. That's why you can give me constitutional money, which is what I'm holding in my hands right now. Only gold and silver are legal tender. Not all of this garbage that enables governments to inflate your wealth and your work away. It is time for us to take our power back. This is such an important topic. This would be one that you should share. Share. I'm telling you right now, this is the most important topic that we're talking about, because shares in the capital of the central bank. Who holds those? Oh, look at this. 7.5 financial stakeholders. These are all private corporations, including Italian banking, heavyweights Intesa Sanpaolo, Unicredit, as well as France's Lender Credit Agricole, and German insurance Allianz. Can you see? So if indeed legally the Bank of Italy owns the gold, but actually they now legally have given that gold under the ownership of the ECB, then corporations in France and Italy and many other places, 7.5 financial stakeholders. Do you get this? Because it's critically important that you do. So if you don't, make sure you show up on our Tuesdays live and you ask these questions, because this is the single most important topic that I don't know that it's the single most important topic because there's so many things that are happening right now. But this is certainly a critically important topic for you to fully understand so that you can make educated choices. What a concept that puts your best interest first. Because certainly when Italy joined the ECB and gave them ownership and control over the gold that the taxpayers bought, I got a problem with that, don't you? But this is why you have to be as independent and self-sufficient as you possibly can be. And the foundation has to be in sound money, because otherwise, guess who's controlling it? You don't. I mean, I know here in the US, the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, people don't like that. So we're going to bring in stable coins. It's not going to be any better, but can you see who's really controlling them? It's the corporations, and the corporations that get all the benefits of the devaluation, the currency devaluations, because they pay you less and less. This is what's enabled that K-shaped recovery. This is what's enabled all of that wealth and income inequality. And it's time for you to look in the mirror and say, is this okay with me? And if it is, rock and roll, hoochie coo. Keep buying those cryptocurrency. Keep staying in the stock and the bond markets. Keep using credit cards and giving up cash, because that's your vote. But at the end of the day, when they have everything and you have nothing, you have no one to complain to. This is a choice. The choice, my choice, is to go on a campaign to, I don't know, get sound money back in the system again, and take away that control from the central banks and the governments that all they really want to do is this. Can you see that that is not in your best interest? Because if you can't, go back to the Fred F. Reed look at that purchasing power chart. It's not in your best interest to have somebody else controlling it. And I will state this one more time for the record. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. Period. Become your own central bank. You need a foundation of sound money that will protect your current standard of living, put you in a position to take advantage of this transition, instead of dying with it, which is what most people will do. And dare I say it, you have the opportunity to be in a better place on the other side of this mess. If you come together in local community and you create that shitty in food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, the community can help you do it. And of course you need shelter. But globally, if we can get just 3% of the population in a global sound money movement to convert their garbage fiat that's being inflated away into sound money that cannot be inflated away, now the public will have taken their power back. And frankly, that's the kind of world that I want to leave. All of those children that are out there now and yet to be born. And there isn't one doubt in my mind, but that together we can do that. 3% is twice as or 3 times as high as the one. We can do that. And let's make this year the best year yet. And until next we meet, please be safe out there. Bye.